Woot woot. All right, you guys are really early. Sorry, I was like taking my I was taking my thumbnail, and it looks like you guys are already asking questions, which is awesome. I didn't know that was possible. Just as a disclaimer, remember, guys, none of this is medical advice. I think that's common sense, but I just want to remind you, like, I'm not a therapist. I'm not a doctor. These are just for education and inspiration. You guys are kind of just picking my brain, and I'm hoping that I'm sending you in a direction, and you go and now dig and do your own research. I do have like a show and tell. I know I get a lot of questions on like iron regulation and working on your iron dysregulation and increasing bioavailable copper and how do we like help with all of our issues. And I know I answer magnesium a lot of the time. And so I did bring a show and tell for magnesium. I'll do it in a second, but I'm going to start working on some of these questions. I am going to limit it to an hour and just like for some housekeeping stuff, just because they're starting to get so long. And I know for people who are like going and listening to them, or if you guys are going to go back and listen to them, you're not gonna like want to listen to the whole thing. So what I'm gonna start doing next week is I'm actually gonna put like a little Q&A box on Instagram and allow you guys to pre-submit your questions. And then I'm gonna go through and pick some of those questions based on like a topic. So I'll kind of keep it topical. And if there's like repeats of questions, then that allows me to kind of do timestamps in the description box and not do repeats as well. But with that being said, let's get started. So working on my gut, symptoms are dandruff, facial redness, especially if I have a glass of wine, so like histamine, insulin resistance, and weight gain past the healing pounds. Okay. Recently started aspirin and taking Dissolvidol and Bifido Maximus. Would you also recommend SF722? If not, which would you eliminate for now, and which would you focus on taking an attempt to eradicate the root cause of the symptoms? Well, remember, guys, symptoms is usually iron dysregulation. Iron is feeding pathogens. Copper is not there to keep it in check. So over time, working on mineral status is actually probably going to be more effective for gut issues than anything else. And magnesium specifically really helps keep things moving because if we're pooping like a couple of times a day, that leaves less time for pathogens to really, be going crazy. So sometimes we want to just like deal with our health or our gut issues and we want to just kill at what's there. But in reality, oftentimes that's why symptoms like keep coming back and it doesn't get better. So honestly, I prefer to take, like, if there's really, really bad symptoms and we are trying to maybe eradicate some of the symptoms while we're working on mineral status, I really like Biotics Research Dysbiocide and FC Cytal. I've named that as one of my favorites because it's a really strong herbal blend, but it's not so powerful that we're wiping those critters out. And if you're taking a probiotic like Bifido Maximus, you want to make sure you're taking it away from those antibacterials. So the antibacterials, like as an example, antibacterials taken with breakfast and taken with dinner and probiotic taken with lunch or whatever. That's just an example. But and I personally don't think it's a good idea to just do those ongoing. I think 4 to 6 weeks on, 4 to 6 weeks off, depending on obviously how somebody's feeling. But yeah, that's just like general. I'm just kind of giving you guys an example. That's not like what I'm saying specifically for you. But all the while you want to be working on like magnesium, sodium, potassium, vitamin A, making sure you're getting retinol. If you're, reacting to dairy and you're not consuming a lot of dairy, like maybe consider if you're not getting regular liver in, making sure you're getting cream and butter and egg yolks. Like all those are really important. Also, don't underestimate the power of switching out starches for fruits and like simpler sugars. A lot of people just like are pounding the starch, and when you have gut issues, it just makes it so much worse, especially the weight gain, but obviously the other symptoms. So I just wanted to show you guys magnesium. And honestly, like I have a magnesium or I have a mentality with magnesium, like the more variety, the better. Not necessarily the more the better. Not everyone can tolerate the same amount of magnesium. And then some people have really low sodium and potassium levels. So when you're first implementing something like magnesium, you need to be really aware of how your body is responding, because you may need to focus on those other minerals first, or if, sodium and potassium isn't working well, you may need to focus on magnesium. So there's a lot of caveats to that. But remember that one of the main cofactors for magnesium is bicarbonate. So magnesium bicarbonate, this is the master mineral drink by Mitigate Stress, but you can make your own magnesium bicarbonate, is a really good form of magnesium. Oftentimes it's really hard to take enough magnesium in the form of bicarbonate. It's also very expensive to me if you're like pre-purchasing it like this. If you're making your own, it's a little bit cheaper. But personally, I don't get all of my magnesium from magnesium bicarbonate. I probably take like, let's see, it says 750 milligrams of magnesium bicarbonate per ounce serving, which comes out to about like, I think 75 milligrams of elemental magnesium or something like that. And then here's magnesium glycinate. So this is not like the only brand. I'm just showing just the one that I use right now. I generally mix it up. Magnesium glycinate is bound to glycine, and I think this one's bound to lysine as well. And so it's pretty bioavailable and pretty absorbable. And I take this one at night. Right now I'm working on my magnesium levels, so I'm taking about 800 milligrams per day. That's not what everyone should be doing. I'm doing it, and I'm also testing pretty regularly. This is Jigsaw's magnesium malate. Sorry, it has a sticker right here, but this is the one I take during the day, and I think it's like a pretty absorbable form as well. And then this is the one I use on my skin, the Life Flow magnesium oil, and I'll usually throw this over my liver and bladder at night to kind of like just my abdomen in general to really help with magnesium and sleep. And Epsom salt baths periodically, or Epsom salt foot baths. But that's just an example of like that magnesium over time really makes a big difference in gut issues because your bowels are moving more regularly. You're more relaxed. You're not jumping into an adrenaline response constantly. There's more blood flow towards the digestive organs, which in turn helps with detoxification. So that is just one thing I wanted to bring up. A lot of people look at gut issues and mineral issues as separate, and most of the time they are very much interconnected and interrelated. So over time, we want to be working on minerals, and then, in the short term, sometimes some gut protocols can help. Okay, sleep is good, daily bowel movements, vitamin E, getting regular minerals and nutrient-dense foods, and plenty of sugar every 3 to 4 hours, ovulate regularly, but the acne has gotten so bad. This is where, oftentimes I see that iron plays a big role in acne, as does estrogen, because estrogen and iron often bind together. So, it's hard for me to know. You probably are doing all the right things. And I think it is something that we tend to do where we're doing all these changes and then a symptom gets worse. And so therefore we automatically think symptoms equal bad. But what if what we're doing is actually allowing movement, whereas before it was stagnation? And I see this a lot. I mean, a lot of fully nourished students, clients, their acne gets worse for a period of time, especially as progesterone increases and metabolism increases. They tend to start to move iron. And so we have to make sure we're getting plenty of vitamin A, retinol, so cream, butter, egg yolks, liver. And then if we're not doing those or we're not doing them enough, sometimes cod liver oil can be helpful addition just to make sure we're getting enough. And then we also need to evaluate if we're getting plenty of whole foods vitamin C, because that's going to also help. And that should be done like away from iron rich foods like beef, for example. You don't want to take vitamin C with beef, or it's going to make you absorb more of the iron. And then for some people who are, good candidates, sometimes blood donation can also be helpful. This is not all the time, so make sure you're assessing your own context. But yeah, a lot of times acne is movement. So how long have you been doing these changes, and how much are you focusing on minerals and liver and gut support? We need to make sure we're really supporting that liver. We're really pooping regularly. We're pooping, and then also we want to make sure that we're getting the nutrients, the cofactors we need to get iron out. So bad after 9 months eating nourishingly. Way worse than before this style of eating. It's even over my neck, chest, too. FML. Well, evaluate if what you're eating, if there are certain things that are irritating your gut. Like, is dairy problematic for you? If that's the case, then sometimes we need to ditch it until we deal with the imbalances driving it. But it's hard to know, so these are kind of my guesses because I don't have a lot of information here, but what changed from what you were doing before to after? And, are you getting the nutrients that you need to deal with what's moving out of the body? Sometimes we need to just slow the heck down. A lot of us expect, 15 years that have built up to get us to this place to just like get better in a month or in a couple of months. It's like this stuff is like layers and layers of junk that our body's really trying to work through and balance. Do you think too much red light has negative effects? I lay in front of mine for 20 to 30 minutes a day, especially for my scalp hair loss. I do think you can do it too much. I think it can be kind of stimulating for some people if they do it too long, especially if you don't have enough fuel in the tank. It is very metabolism supportive, but it also helps the body deal with iron and makes copper more bioavailable. So I like that. But yeah, of course, with anything, we can do pretty much anything too much, honestly. What are your favorite antimicrobials? I like oregano P73, which is the North American Urban Spice Co. I love Biotics Research, Dysbiocide, and FC Cytal used together. I know I talk about those a lot, but they have a great blend and kind of makes it easy. They work pretty well as long as you really keep your bowels moving. They've actually been shown in research studies to be as effective as antibiotics for SIBO. So those were one of the ones used, and then the Metagenics Candibactin was also used. Candibactin is a little more expensive, and it also is essential oils rather than hard herbs. So I prefer the Biotics just because it's a little bit gentler. But those are not the only ones I like. Like berberine can sometimes come in handy. Raw garlic kind of sliced and left to sit for about 15 minutes and then swallowed like a pill can be very effective. Remember that vitamin A rich foods like vitamin A has some antimicrobial effects as well as vitamin E does. So don't like overlook the fat soluble vitamins for that. Trying to think of what else. I have a lot in my arsenal. Pau de Arco can work well sometimes for fungus. Even like certain probiotics can help crowd out fungus, or crowd out bad bacteria. So this is why I really like the Bifido Maximus. I like Natron's Bifido Infantis. There's a lot of different strains that can actually crowd out more bad bacteria, I guess we can call it, like bad. Trying to think of what else. Oh, sometimes I like just a regular like clove, wormwood type herbal blend, which is pretty common in like parasites eradication protocols. It just really depends on what people are dealing with, but I tend to like opt for the most gentle. The gentler, the better. Do you think taking deer antler velvet is okay for women? Looking into it for raising libido. I've looked into it. I've never personally experimented with it because I tend to have like higher testosterone, more go towards that like masculine side pretty easily, like just as most women with PCOS do. And but I have definitely looked at it, like pine pollen as like an androgen regulator, and as well as deer antler. So I personally am curious. I haven't had any experience with women using it to increase libido, but I don't look at it and say like, oh, I would never do that. Honestly, I'm not sure. I know it's like pretty regularly used for men, but that doesn't mean it's like only for men. I was raised on soy formula an extra year as I was a very small baby, and I have had digestive skin issues my whole life. Is there anything I can do now to reverse the damage? So a lot of people need to remember about formula. It's like, yeah, the soy is problematic, but the most problematic part of formula is the fact that it has iron added to it. Breast milk does not have any iron in it for a very specific reason, because iron feeds pathogens. And that's to me, probably the most problematic part. So when someone is formula fed, you're trying to actually regulate their iron, the iron in their tissues. And the way that this is done is I highly recommend that anyone who is struggling with those things, check out the RCP, or the Root Cause Protocol by Morley Robbins. It's not perfect, but the supplements in that Root Cause Protocol and the general information is so helpful for people who are struggling with chronic inflammatory or digestive issues. I think it's a really great complement to what I teach in Fully Nourished. But that is I think great for people especially for people who are exposed to a lot of iron, especially as children. I'm doing it now, like I've talked about this before, because when I was first like diagnosed with all my issues, a naturopathic doctor put me on 650 milligrams of iron oxide while I was put on estrogen cream. And now I know better, obviously, but at the time I didn't know better. And so I was on that for like probably like almost a year. That is a ton of iron. To put it in perspective, I really like women only need to eat maybe like 1 or 2 milligrams per day. And then the rest is recycling constantly. The 25 milligrams is recycling constantly. So if we don't have the nutrients to deal with that iron, what does our body do? It just pushes it into the tissues so that it doesn't feed pathogens. And that's a lot of iron to deal with in my tissues. So I've been working on that for quite some time. And that's what has actually driven me to become an RCP consultant and like dig into that iron and copper relationship a little bit more, mostly because I'm interested in it for myself, but also it's something that I'm realizing most of my clients and actually a lot of fully nourished students are probably struggling with as well, because there's all type, iron is in birth control, iron is in fortified foods. There's a lot of places where we're getting just excess exposure and our body's not dealing with it. It's putting it in the tissues. Do you ever eat bacon or sausage? Yeah. I don't like eat it a ton. I just, because it's not for me, like I have a hard time getting high quality pastured pigs or pastured pork. And so I don't eat it a ton, but I do. I definitely do. And I do better on like a moderate fat diet. So, I tend to opt for like more protein sources that are higher in protein, not as high in fat. What I do is I tend to combine like things like sausage or bacon or ham with something that's a little higher in protein. And not as high in fat. So that's kind of like the way that I look at it. But yeah, I enjoy those foods for sure. I just don't do them a ton. Is there a reason why I'm constantly in the mood when I'm on my period? It's really interesting because a lot of women ask me that. I am that way as well. And I'm honestly not sure. It makes me wonder if if hormones dropping is kind of part of it. I think, estrogen, especially for estrogen dominant, can really take a hit on the libido. So yeah, it is something that I wonder about. I need to kind of like do a little bit more digging as to why that might be. So I have a protein shake here, so I'm going to like periodically sip it before it turns into like, when it turns into like a block of lard and you're like, I've been using that Julian Bakery like paleo thin beef protein powder, and it actually works really, really well. And it's not dairy. What are the benefits of It's mostly because it's rich in magnesium and copper, but it has some enzymes in it that really help with liver detoxification. I mean, I don't think it's necessary, but it's a very helpful tool that I bring up for people. I don't necessarily recommend it, but it is in the Detox lemonade because it really can help support detoxification. Coming from an intermittent fasting background, now if I don't eat every 3 to 4 hours, I start to feel sick, which makes my job in the operating room difficult. Any suggestions? Yeah, that's really tough. And this is not like uncommon. People who intermittent fast for a really long time, their liver has a really hard time storing up glycogen. Glycogen is a stored form of sugar. The liver can hold about 150 grams of glycogen, and it likes to hold 150 grams of glycogen. And so when we're intermittent fasting, we're constantly forcing our liver to empty its glycogen stores. And so it can take some time of consistent feeding to get our glycogen, our liver storing glycogen again. Because, when we're so glucose deficient, what happens is every time we go to eat glucose, we actually use it and we don't store it in the liver. So it can just be time and consistency. And, when you're in the operating room or you're a nurse or something like that, you kind of just have to be creative. I know that's probably not the answer that you want. So if you absolutely cannot eat in the operating room, I would make it a point to, when you're out of the operating room, to be uber consistent as possible. Meaning like, can you pound a little like, fruit pouch, like those little like baby food fruit pouch, like right before you go into the operating room, like just run to the bathroom really quick and, squeeze it into your mouth. Obviously, like that's just an example. And I don't know, the exact logistics of your job. So forgive me if I'm ignorant, but I think we have to just get creative because something is better than nothing. And this might mean just on the days where you're not in the operating room, making sure you're being very, very consistent about filling up your liver with glycogen. Are there any scenarios when vitamin E is actually a pro-oxidant versus an antioxidant? Yeah, of course, if you're taking too much of it, or if you're doing tons of vitamin C and vitamin E, if you are doing too much, I think that can be a problem as well. I'm trying to think of what else. Also, if it's like imbalance with other fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin A, sometimes people do better with like a whole foods vitamin E complex, like the one from North American Urban Spice Co. called Purely E. But yeah, there are times when it can be a pro-oxidant for sure. I think overdoing it on E is not a good idea. That's pretty much my like bottom line to that one is I think the whole mega dosing thing is not necessarily a great idea. But yeah. There is a time and a place where antioxidants can become pro-oxidants. What can cause high calcium levels in the blood? Lots of things. I mean, vitamin D, which can be very toxic in high amounts, magnesium being low, vitamin K2 being low because vitamin K2 helps put calcium into the bones of the teeth, sodium and potassium being low, like other mineral dysregulations. Oftentimes, and then high prolactin often can do that as well because it's pulling calcium from the bones. If I get diarrhea from coffee, would decaf be a better option? I'm guessing it was the caffeine that gave me the problems. A lot of times when people get diarrhea from coffee, it's because their bile is flowing again. Coffee increases bile flow from the liver and the gallbladder. This is why it can actually like stimulate bowel movements for people. And when people's gallbladder has been kind of like sludgy and backed up for a while, when you first start to work on it, it oftentimes like increases the amount of bile salts or bile acids in the small intestine, which is like known as like bile diarrhea. It literally burns coming out. But that's just one theory. But yeah, I mean, if it's caffeine, that's, if it is that, then the caffeine would be probably part of the problem. Is it good to actually look directly into the sun when you go outside? No. I personally get sunlight in my eyes, but I don't directly look at the sun. I mean, maybe there are people that say yes. I feel like it would be kind of eye damaging. Hi, Jess. Hope you're well. Curious about your take on a strong immune system. One that never gets sick but only mild cases, gets sick with strong symptoms but infrequently. I mean, that's really, I think, how it's supposed to be. And that's how it actually gets stronger. Never getting sick is not a good thing. So yeah, I mean, that's how it's supposed to be, I feel like. That's what we want. That's goals, When it's weak and we're getting sick all the time, it's usually a sign we need to support our body. How much magnesium is too much? I'm currently taking 400 milligrams of magnesium bisglycinate. That's different for every single person. I mean, some people will say like, you only need, 400 milligrams a day. And then some people will say like, take 5 times your body weight in milligrams. So there's a big spectrum of advice out there. I think if you're just kind of supplementing blindly, meaning you're not doing anything based on testing, like you're not looking at your RBC magnesium, or you're not, which would be the blood test, and then you're not looking at hair tissue magnesium, which would be an HTMA, then it's probably a good idea to practice like some moderation. But if you know you're low, then that's going to change the amount that you take. And then also like certain people just can't tolerate a lot of magnesium for whatever reason, whether it's because their other minerals are low or it's just causing too much of a detoxification effect and they need to slowly work up. So that's, it's very much based on context, I feel like. Any guidance on water intake? Thank you, Jess, for all that you do. I do have an Instagram post a while back where I talk about overhydration, and it's interesting because like it was fun reading the comments because there were so many people that said like, yeah, like I know so and so went to the hospital because they overhydrated, and I know that that's a thing, right? I think it's called hyperatremia, but I hadn't heard of it being so common. I do know that, there's a lot of people that chug water constantly and their cells feel super waterlogged. They feel very heavy and they're peeing constantly and peeing all their minerals out. So I personally think like we have thirst for a reason. The only, I think, like exception to that would be someone who's an athlete. So doing like very hardcore training or running a lot or doing things that are maybe causing them to sweat more, and their thirst wouldn't be a great indicator of them needing water or hydration. But I think for the average Joe, it's important to get most of our hydration from our food and then mineral-rich beverages like broths and coconut water and juices and milk and things like that, and then drink water when we're thirsty. So I don't think there's like general recommendations. And remember, like our thyroid is greatly going to regulate how our cells stay hydrated. And so are minerals. How do you feel about arrowroot powder? I want to make marshmallows and heard it's the best to use in the recipe. Yeah, like arrowroot is the same thing as tapioca. And I think if you do fine with it, like it can be a great like grain-free alternative to flours. Hey Jessica, I have endo and I'm working on balancing my hormones. The past few menstrual cycles I've noticed in my Diva cup clear liquid and a couple times each cycle. What does this mean? Honestly, I'm not sure. I would get it checked out if you're worried about it. But yeah, like I am honestly not sure. Do you have any of Fallon Danae's food plans? Yeah, I do have. I did purchase one of her meal plans for my like calorie needs, just to kind of like check it out. And yeah, it's really awesome. I think like it's a great resource, especially if you like want to take the questions out of planning your meals. And it's definitely something that like I don't love doing. I don't love meal planning. I don't, love recipe development. Like I'm not someone that's like sitting in the kitchen trying to develop recipes. I constantly am cooking like out of my head. So if you like recipes and meal plans, it can be a great place to start. I think I have a coupon code for them. It's JAW10. My team handles the coupon code. So sometimes I'm like, I think I have a coupon code. But if you ever are like, I hope she has a coupon code for it, it's usually always like JAW10 or JAW15. So I think that should work. I know your specialty is women, but I have a man-related question. My husband is having severe night sweats to the point he can't sleep. It's like the minute he falls asleep, he starts sweating. Yeah, does he eat regularly and consistently? Many of the principles I talk about apply to women too, or men too. It's just that I have kind of geared things towards women because I felt like that was like a better business practice to kind of niche down. But a lot of what I talk about applies to men as well. Men are a little bit more resilient to stress, but once they're stressed, they are pretty much in the same place, except they don't have a 28-day cycle or 28-day rhythm. They actually have a 24-hour rhythm. So their testosterone peaks in the morning, and over the course of the day, it wanes to be its lowest at night, and then it does it again the next day. That's really the only difference in regards to hormones. And they need progesterone too, but not as much. And they obviously don't have as much estrogen, which is what actually makes them more resilient to stressors. But when a man's body is stressed out, it often will turn testosterone into estrogen, which happens mostly in the liver via the enzyme aromatase. And this is happening because of high stress. So this is where all the principles I teach for women do come in for a man, making sure he's eating within an hour of waking, making sure he's eating enough calories. A lot of men are just under eating. They're really stressed out. They're running on caffeine. They're not willing to take any supplements. They're undersleeping. Men are really hustlers. Like I feel like in a way that women, we have a pain threshold in the sense of like our body really starts screaming at us. Whereas men, I think their signals are a lot more subtle because they will just ignore the heck out of them. And so they might go on, for years, they're exhausted, they're fatigued, but because they're trying to care for their family or, they just do what they need to do. And this is why they often it's like men are just like, they go until they have a heart attack. And that's an extreme way of like looking at it, but I'm just trying to make a point is like men need to balance their stress as well. They have a higher need for calories, a higher need for energy. They're often bigger. They often have more muscle because of the testosterone, which causes more metabolic activity. And so, yeah, they need to be eating enough. They need to be getting minerals in. They need to be sleeping. They need to be getting light. They need to be having time to rest and play and relax and have some fun. And but they mostly need to balance their protein, carbs, and fats, just like we do. I've been trying to do FN for about 4 to 5 months. I've been really enjoying it overall, but I also feel like my acne has gotten progressively worse. I have a feeling it's all the milk. Yeah, if you're doing tons of milk and it's not working for you, don't do that. It's very possible to do, what I teach in Fully Nourished without dairy. It's just that a lot of people, they go from 0 to 100, and I try to do my best in Fully Nourished. Like, I feel like I constantly warn, like, implement this stuff slowly. Make sure you are, slowly implementing things. And I feel like I try to emphasize that as much as possible, but people, for whatever reason, just like go from 0 to 100. They just jump in feet first. And there's a reason why I warn to go slow. It's not because I'm just like a party pooper. It's because when you go from one way of eating to a totally different way of eating overnight, your body is not going to adjust well, and it's going to take a lot of time. So if you feel like you went too hard, too fast with something, and that's what your intuition is telling you, scale back and then slowly implement and figure out your balance of things. But yeah, for a lot of people, it's the dairy because they went, 3 years without eating it, and then they just jumped into chugging milk. And I'm like, probably not a great idea. So yeah, if you feel like it's the milk and the dairy, scale back. You guys can trust your guts, trust your intuition. It doesn't mean that like, Fully Nourished doesn't work, or, this diet is not for me if dairy is not working for you. It just means like, okay, I need to like scale back and figure out what's going on that's not allowing me to digest dairy. Looking for advice on quality brands of vitamin K2 and spore-based probiotic. Currently using Vitalife and Just Thrive, but they're a bit pricey for my budget right now. Thanks. Spore-based probiotics, I'm trying to think. They tend to be very expensive. Like, I personally would not take a probiotic over trying to take a cheap probiotic. You know what I mean? Like, I would prefer to do a bite of sauerkraut a couple times a day or something like that than try to like be like, I just need a cheaper probiotic. As for the vitamin K, I personally really like a brand called Innovix. I think it's on Amazon. I'm careful with it just because it is like a higher dose, but I really like that brand. And it's not as high dose as Vitalife is. Do you like olive leaf extract for the gut? Yes, I actually do. Thanks for bringing that one up. I do like olive leaf extract. It's great. It's particularly a great antifungal. I like Crucial 4s, actually. They have like a tincture that I really like. How to speed up gut motility. Thanks for all you do. Yeah, so over time, obviously, gut motility is going to be increased as we increase our metabolism, especially for someone who has like very low temps, very low pulses, very slow metabolism overall. Of course, our gut is slow. So we need to like work on increasing that, and that will just happen over time. But a lot of people need magnesium in their life. That's just, one thing that a lot of people don't realize, that magnesium is responsible for the relaxation, whereas calcium is responsible for the contraction. And your gut, a lot of your gut is a muscle. Peristalsis is a muscular contraction. So those are very important, as well as potassium and sodium. Potassium and sodium play a big role in nerve signaling to the gut and calming the nervous system down so that the vagus nerve can communicate with the organs. And so those minerals are probably like, if I had a sluggish digestive system, I would actually be focusing more on sodium, potassium, and magnesium than anything else. If you need like quick relief, some people like to use Cascara sagrada, some people like to use rhubarb root. I think that those are both really effective. BioRay actually has like a kid's tincture that's called like Pooper or something like that, and I actually have used that and it works really well. A lot of people will use it on their kids, but I think like in the meantime, working on things that are going to help stimulate the bowels can be okay. Just working on why they're not moving over time is important. Is there such a thing as consuming too much gelatin? My mom and I rely a lot on gummies for snacks and to eat with muscle meat, and between the two of us go through 3 pounds of gelatin a month. Too much? It's possible if you feel like you're like really not feeling well, or you're not doing enough protein from other sources, then I would say it might be too much. But if you're doing them in addition to like muscle meats and dairy and eggs and things like that, possibly good. The only time I would ever like question that is if I wasn't doing well. But I wouldn't stress about like, is this too much or, is it not enough if I was doing great and I was seeing a lot of results from it. I think it's just really dependent on the person. As long as we're getting protein from other sources, because I think that people think that like gelatin and collagen can take the place of protein, of complete proteins, and they cannot. Collagen and gelatin are not complete proteins. So if we're relying super heavily on collagen and gelatin for protein, then we do need to take a step back and say, okay, I got to get more protein from other sources. But if we're doing it in addition to protein from other sources, then I think like as long as we're doing well, it can be great. But yeah, there is such a thing as too much glycine. I mean, that would be hard to do with food, but it's possible. What is the difference between microbial, rennet, and enzymes in cheese? Depending on where the rennet came from, if it's from animal rennet or vegetable rennet, microbial rennet and enzymes are I think pretty interchangeable. I'm honestly not like a big cheese maker, so I'm not sure, but I do know that they're a food additive and oftentimes like can be pretty irritating to the gut for a lot of people. What could cause high fasting insulin but normal fasting glucose and normal HbA1c? A lot of things depending on like what the context is, but was it high fasting in the morning or fasting after meals? Sometimes like a insulin, A1C, and glucose test is better taken during the day because you're seeing a better picture of like what's happening after meals, whereas high in the morning can have a lot of reasoning. But a lot of people would say insulin resistance, that might be something to explore a little more. Elevated insulin, the problem with chronically elevated insulin is that it can cause oxidation of iron, and that's when you can start to see problems with like lipofuscin and gut problems and things like that. But yeah, I mean, exploring insulin resistance in the form of, a lot of times it's driven by iron dysregulation for a lot of people. But if there's estrogen dominance and possibly magnesium deficiency, remember that iron just burns up magnesium faster than you can intake it. Those are all factors that we would maybe want to assess. But usually, I mean, the general consensus is like very elevated insulin is due to insulin resistance. I would personally not just like make that assumption and look a little bit deeper, maybe possibly doing like a post-glucose tolerance test. I think I'm saying the right thing, PGTT, or oral glucose tolerance test, where you drink the solution and then you check your glucose afterwards, and that could be helpful. Or testing blood sugar after meals. Because it is interesting to have like normal fasting glucose and normal HbA1c. Maybe a dumb question, but what are muscle meats and should we avoid them? If so, what would you recommend replacing them with? Muscle meats are meats that come from the muscle of an animal. So pretty much all the meats that are commonly ate today are muscle meats, steak, beef, things like that. Whereas before, traditionally we were eating the whole animal. We were eating organ meats like kidneys and liver and spleen and things like that. We were consuming the bones in the form of broths like oxtail, things like that. So we were trying to really utilize the whole animal. Whereas now we're really just very used to eating just muscles of animals. It's okay to eat muscle meats. We just want to make sure we're getting a combination of proteins and not just getting our protein from just muscle meats. This is where fish can come in, and shellfish and eggs and dairy. And we shouldn't be. Should I worry about gaining more weight? Do most people at first, even if you already have weight to lose? If you just like start pounding carbs and start pounding calories, of course, if our metabolism is sluggish and we just start to, we go from eating 1,300 calories a day to 2,300 calories in a day, I get you guys are excited, but of course, our body's no longer using energy well. We can't do that. So if you're really not wanting to gain weight, be conscious of how you change your diet. This is where the recommendation to go slow matters. Why are we in this like race? Yeah, we might not get rid of our symptoms as quickly, but if you really don't want to gain any weight, then go slow. Increase your calories slow. Increase your carbs slow. Make sure you're getting plenty of protein. Make sure you're moving your body. Those are all really important things to do. And it's it's great to dive in and learn, but when you actually are implementing concepts into your life, do them slowly. It's just better all around for most people. Hi, Jess. Best time of the day to drink the detox lemonade? How many times per day? I personally only do it once because, like, there comes a point where you're just doing like 1,000 things in a day. But I don't think that there's a perfect time. Like, some people like to do it mid-afternoon. Some people like to do it right when they wake up. But I think it might be worth it to do it away from food, but I wouldn't make that a rule, meaning like it's okay to do it with food too. What natural pain reliever do you recommend for pain and headaches besides Tylenol or Ibuprofen, which I know is hard on the liver and body in general? I have lupus and get bad headaches at times. Well, first of all, we want to be assessing like what's the pattern with our headaches. A lot of times people are getting really bad low blood sugar, or it's when they're very estrogen dominant. Lupus is a condition that at least partially has estrogen and iron to blame. There's a lot of research pointing specifically to estrogen. And so oftentimes the pain gets worse when estrogen is at its highest. Which is interesting because headaches can also get bad when estrogen is at its highest, which makes me wonder like, but I personally don't think that there's like a pain reliever that's necessarily that's natural, that's going to be the same as like Tylenol or Ibuprofen. I mean, aspirin is probably a better choice for people who are not allergic, just because it's acetylsalicylic acid, which comes from like, you know, things like the salicylates, like, or salicylates, like white willow bark and stuff like that. What causes low testosterone in men? Stress, not eating enough, pounding beer, you know, frying themselves with EMFs, drinking way too much caffeine, fasting, working out way too hard without fueling their bodies properly, not getting enough sleep. Yeah, I would say like just pretty much all the things that cause low progesterone in women. Most of the time men like are really bad at taking care of themselves. And so therefore, like, of course, their sperm count is going to go down and their testosterone is going to be low. How much vitamin C do you try to consume daily? I probably aim for around like 500 to 1,000 milligrams of whole foods vitamin C. I definitely don't overdo it. I don't think more is better with a lot of things, but yeah, I try to like get probably around 1,000 milligrams ish, maybe 500 to 1,000 between like my orange juice. I usually put frozen cherries in like my protein shakes. Do like red bell peppers, camu powder, my protein shakes. And then I take some Whole Foods vitamin C and Pure Synergy brand. Usually between all of those, like I'm good with it. What kinds of magnesium are good to take, and what are the benefits of trying different kinds? I take a raw liquid magnesium. I talked about that actually at the beginning of this live. So like right at the beginning, once I'm done, just like I show you all of the magnesiums. I did like kind of a show and tell. How much do you know of a good digestive enzyme supplement? Not necessarily. Like digestive enzymes are kind of just like a Band-Aid. They don't really do much. If we're having a problem with our digestion, like we really should get to the bottom of it. Do temps and pulses need to be in range before any exercise can be added in? And if my temp rises to 98 throughout the day, my average pulse is 73, is low intense exercise okay as long as I keep stress low? I think that's really dependent on the person. Some people have very little tolerance to exercise. If you're truly committed to wanting to like heal your metabolism in the sense of like you just want to do it as fast as possible, then sometimes like it's not worth it. But for some people, they actually want to continue to exercise. They maybe want their metabolism healing journey to be a little slower. And I think at that point, like moderation is key. I think for everyone, they have a threshold, and people are just really bad at listening to their body. And I'm not saying you, I'm just saying like people tend to be like all or nothing when it comes to exercise. And it's like one of those things where you might only be able to do like, you know, a few sets of squats at first, or like a few exercises very slowly with a lot of rest in between. But over time, you might be able to do these things faster with less rest, maybe a little bit heavier, and your temps and pulses will still be okay. So I would just be watching my temps and pulses and seeing how low they're going. And I honestly think it's better to actually observe not just the day of, but the next day. Because a lot of people don't realize like what they did the day before is going to affect the next day. And that's when the problems really start to arise. I switched out starch for fruit and fruit juices and developed a kidney infection and kidney pain the whole time I abstained from starch. I would be very curious as to what bacteria are possibly living in the urinary tract that were being fed. But yeah, I mean, maybe it's minerals. Like there are a lot of factors involved in like bacterial issues and bacterial overload. And I think like, again, people tend to go like one way or the other. I personally don't abstain from all starch when I'm like being low on starches. First of all, because I don't like doing that. And second of all, like I don't think in extremes anymore. But yeah, I'm that is very interesting to develop a kidney infection just from fruit. I would be very curious if it was die-off. I've always had very dry skin since having the COV mid-October. My scalp is super dry and flaky now too. I've started eating pro-metabolic the last 1.5 months, and I'm also gaining weight. Help. Well, did you take vitamin D? That can be like very problematic for a lot of people. Did you take like zinc, like those types of things? Like even though they're generally recommended, they really mess with our like copper and iron metabolism, and then also, which is going to totally mess with our thyroid. And it specifically the hormone D displaces retinol, vitamin A, from the liver. And so when we overdo it on that, what happens is we are very deficient in retinol. And that, of course, is going to affect the quality of our skin and slow down our metabolism. Ways to lower cortisol. I'm always in fight or flight mode. Eat enough and eat more regularly. A lot of women are very much under eating. They're like, oh, I'm just eating 1,300 calories a day, which is enough for like a 3-year-old toddler. So like kind of when somebody's chronically stuck in a state of fight or flight, like if I was working with a client, the first thing we do is make sure they're just eating enough, eating within an hour of waking, eating every 3 to 4 hours, balancing their meals with protein, carb, and fat, and not having any liquid meals. Like people that are like, oh, I just checked my smoothie while I was driving. And I'm like, let's stop that nonsense. So eating like solid meals and spreading them over the course of the day, not being like, oh, well, I am eating like meals and snacks, but they're like, you know, sporadic. Like, oh, sometimes I eat them at 10, sometimes I eat them at 12, sometimes I eat them at 1. Like, let's create a consistent routine that your body can rely on. Wake up around the same time every day. Eat breakfast around the same time every day. Eat your snack around the same time every day. If you work out, make sure you're not overdoing it and do it around the same time every day. Meal, snack around the same time every day with around the same like calories and nutrients so that your body is getting consistency. That's like always the first step I take. 8 times out of 10, that's the problem. If that is not helping after like, let's say a couple of weeks, then you go to the next step and you say, okay, what in your life is driving you up a wall? Because there's something there. Now, I am not a therapist. I send people to go get therapy, but I think it's important to evaluate. Like, we're not robots. We can't like just handle the weight of the world. We only have a threshold of a certain amount of stressors, and then it all comes tumbling down. A lot of people who are in fight or flight mode are like type A individuals. Everything has to be perfect. They're saying yes to everybody, and they're trying to please everybody. And that's like a recipe for disaster. I used to be that way. I've created a zone of DGAF in the sense of like, if it is not an absolute yes, it's a hell no. And I always tell people, instead of saying like an automatic yes, is like, let me think about that and I'll get back to you. And that usually means like it's going to be a no, but I'll think about it. But if something is not an absolute priority in my life, I don't do it because I now know that I have a limited amount of energy to give. And I need to fill up my tank first before I help fill up other people's tanks. So that's kind of like a general, like, let's start with the food. Let's make sure like emotionally we're taken care of. And then if that is not the case, then we may need to do more minerals. We need to maybe be doing adaptogens, getting better sleep. All of those are factors as well. But there can be a lot of things, but it's usually like the fundamentals and the foundations that are being overlooked. And deep breathing is very important. A lot of us are very tight. Our posture is very, and we're just like, yeah, this is great for breathing. Like, no, it's not. Shoulders back, take some deep breaths, make sure you're breathing deeply. When we're hyperventilating, it's horrible for our nervous system. What do you think of gestational diabetes? pro-metabolic eating, low sugar, low carb, etc. Diabetes is caused by polyunsaturated fats and iron overload. So that has nothing to do with sugar. But yeah, I've seen, it's really interesting because what actually turned me on to pro-metabolic eating, there's been a few things that did, but one of the main ones was I was super into the low carb community. Like before I was pro-metabolic, I thought like sugar was the devil. I literally thought sugar was the devil. And I followed so many people who were keto, so many people who were low carb, who were like demonizing carbs. And two of them that I followed, interestingly enough, within like the first 16 weeks of their pregnancy, developed gestational diabetes. And that like got me thinking. I was just like, how can you, they were eating low carb during their pregnancy and they got diabetes. And I was just like, what's going on? It was like my whole world was rocked because I made that observation. I was just like, okay, if this person's getting diabetes and they're low carb and this person's getting diabetes because they're low carb, like, how is that possible if they're not even eating sugar, because sugar causes diabetes, And so it just like got my mind thinking. And I've really realized like it has very little to do with the carbs and very much to do with cortisol, high stress, not eating enough, not getting enough protein, carb, and fat together, not eating the right types of fats. And then, of course, I think like prenatal vitamins play a big role because most of them are absolute SHIT and contain a ton of iron. So that's just my 2 cents. Not an expert, but that's my 2 cents. I just whacked myself in the face, if you noticed. I got a little bit passionate about that one. What can help lower super high HSG levels during pregnancy? It is causing extreme nausea to the point of many hospital visits and malnutrition. A lot of people's blood sugar is like dysregulated. So during pregnancy, a lot of women are under eating and they're not eating frequently enough to the point where extreme nausea, they can't keep anything down. And it's usually a protein issue. They're in bioavailable protein, meaning like animal protein. The best fix for that is to like eat every 2 hours. And sometimes we actually have to force it down for a while until we can actually get up. Let's see if you guys can hear me. Okay, it said my internet connection was unstable, so I was like, oh no, did I lose you? Let's see. Let me get back to where I was. There's some weirdo like in the comments saying like, you look horrible, girl. Why you look so ugly? It's like, oh man. It's like if I was a little bit more insecure about myself, that would really hurt. But I don't take myself that seriously. So I don't know why I'm so ugly. Sorry. Let's see. Okay, sorry. Avocados are often called superfoods. Is this a marketing ploy like the nut industry? Is it bad to eat a lot of avocado? I don't think it's bad to eat avocado. Is it bad to eat a lot of avocado? I don't think that they're foods that we would naturally eat a ton of. Now, I think like whole avocado is better than avocado oil because like who in their right mind would press avocados for their oil? Us. But yeah, I personally think overdoing it on avocado can be really problematic. I don't think we should be pounding avocados. It's a very lucrative industry, which should tell us everything we need to know. Like anytime something's a lucrative industry like avocado or nuts, it automatically becomes this amazing superfood. And it's just like, maybe we should just rethink that. And oftentimes, like women crave so much avocado because they're not getting enough of the fats that they need, which is like cream, butter, liver, egg yolks. Those are where we actually get a ton of fat solubles. Notice I look puffy bigger the day after a workout. Clothes and rings don't fit as well. If I take an extra day off, I go back to normal. Wondering if this is inflammation, a sign I'm not recovering well. Yeah, oftentimes exercise will increase endotoxin if we have like really bad gut issues or we're already struggling with like cortisol and adrenaline issues. The lack of blood flow to the digestive tract during a workout can make a big difference in our bacterial issues. So for a lot of people, like working out too hard when they are their gut's very impaired, it actually works against them. Is it true that it's better to go to sleep before 11 p.m.? I've always been a night owl, and I'm trying to unsuccessfully to change that. Also, is steam refined coconut oil still good? I've never heard of steam refined. Like, I'm assuming that's like just refined how they refine it. But yeah, it's a good idea to get to bed before 11 p.m. After 11 p.m., we get a second cortisol spike, and it really can disrupt the quality of our sleep pretty much all night long. I've heard you mention that upper stomach bloating is usually a sign of SIBO. What about bloat in the lower belly, large intestine issue? Well, remember that like our small intestines are right here, and then our large intestine actually goes around. So keep in mind that, because I think sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, I think I have like large intestine bloat, when in reality it's like that's just the bottom of their small intestine. So the small intestine is a longer intestinal tract, and bacteria often starts in the lower small intestine, and then over time it can actually migrate to the higher small intestine. So it's not necessarily like a indicator of if we have SIBO or not, if we just have low stomach bloat or high stomach bloat. Like we can have both and have SIBO. Can you use the full spectrum red light and the red heat light at the same time? I don't know. I've never done it, but I don't see why not. Might be a little overload. Hi, Jessica. I noticed when I started Shilajit, within a month, I started to get severe itchy red skin peeling on my face, hands like a burn. I have no idea what to do. Next, dermatologist, allergy testing. Well, I think the first thing is to just stop whatever is causing our issue and just see if that helps chill things out. But yeah, I mean, go see a dermatologist, go see if it's allergy. I would assume you've stopped the Shilajit. But yeah, I mean, for a lot of us, when we're detoxing or we're going through like herxing or detoxification, it cannot be very fun. But I'm not saying that's exactly what it is. It's just we sometimes have to try to figure out and use our gut. Like, is it actually a detox reaction, or is it our symptoms getting worse? Is it possible to heal from 20 years of taking birth control? And can that be done if you cannot take supplements due to sensitivities from tapering other medications? I think the better question is like, what are we going to do moving forward regardless? Like if I said no, what would be the difference? You know what I mean? So I think a lot of people need to just focus on like, okay, what is my gut telling me now? Anything, if we're really struggling, like anything is better than what got us here. So I don't think the right question is like, is it possible to heal? I think it's, well, what are we going to do moving forward? I don't, that's like a really, it's not a good question to ask, because it's kind of a like, oh, if somebody tells me no, then it's going to be a no. Of course, we can take steps to drive balance in our body and support our body, and we can give it space to do its thing. And that's the best we can do. To say like yes or no, it would do someone a disservice. And yeah, we can absolutely balance without supplements. Supplements help us kind of get to where we want to go faster, but I think it's very possible. Hey, Jess, I was wondering, what does dull aching pain to the right of my lower stomach mean after urinating? I'm not sure, but I would be looking into like bladder issues, bladder infections, those types of things. Would you be pretty satisfied with a pretty consistent waking temp of 98, temp throughout the day about 98.6, and pulse throughout the day of about 78 as a good sign that metabolism has improved? It just depends on the context. Like for one person, that might be great. If they're sleeping well, they have amazing digestion, their hair's growing great, their skin's great. But for somebody who's struggling with like severe issues, or like, let's say they're not pooping regularly, they're not sleeping, they have horrible gut and digestive issues, then I would assume that's stress driving those temps and pulses. So this is why like it's very important to look at the context of your temps and pulses and not just be like, oh, my temps and pulses are good, so therefore I'm good. It really depends on like how we're doing overall. And for a lot of people, let's say it is driven by stress, they'll find that as they deal with that stress, their temps and pulses will start to lower before they raise. And that's usually a sign that they were driven by stress in the first place. What would you suggest for a woman who struggled to lose weight for years and had their thyroid removed? I think it just depends on the person. You know, thyroid hormone is important, but converting thyroid hormone is even more important. We convert in the liver and the gut. And so a lot of people have a sluggish metabolism for a lot of reasons, mineral dysregulation being one of many. So I would focus on the things I could control. Like, you can't get your thyroid back if it's been removed, but you can focus on minerals. You can focus on liver health, balancing your blood sugar, building muscle, which will help utilize free fatty acids, making sure we're getting plenty of sleep, making sure we're getting light. We can focus on those things. So I'd be focused on the things I could control. How much salt would you say is good to aim for in a day, especially if you have adrenal issues and are moderately active? I personally go by cravings, and I honestly think that my appetite for salt is tightly regulated, because this came from an experiment of just I constantly add salt into everything, adrenal cocktail. I add sodium to what my workout drink. I add salt to all my food. And there was a time when I just stopped craving salt, in the sense of I would put some on in a drink, for example, or a glass of water, and it would just be too much salt. So I think that at least for me, my salt appetite is tightly regulated, but I try to just be moderate with it. I'm not going to pound it in the sense of I'm pounding sodium, but I'm not getting enough potassium or magnesium. I do a lot of salt, but I don't go so crazy with it to cause too much problems. But honestly, how much to aim for in a day, I don't really know. That's not really something that I stress too much about. It just make sure we're salting to taste. What do you think of bio-raised sleep aid? I'm actually not familiar with it. Does it have melatonin in it? Because if it does, then it's a no-go. But if it's just herbs, probably valerian and stuff like that, it might be helpful. What causes hair loss at a young age in men? Thyroid issues. A lot of them are hypothyroid because their stress is high, and then it's turning to estrogen, and their gut's messed up because they're drinking tons of beer, and it's a mess. But yeah, it's usually metabolic issues, thyroid issues. And then genetics can play a role. I've just been eating pro-metabolically, but I have always had very red cheeks, little acne, less since eating pro-metabolic, but my cheeks have always been super red. What can help reduce redness? Well, sometimes if we have histamine issues, this is why. Some things that can downregulate histamine while we're dealing with our iron and copper issues by getting plenty of vitamin A, magnesium, B vitamins is something called quercetin. Some people have a very high amount of iron in the liver, which is causing histamine issues. So quercetin can help with that. Not always. It's sometimes just a Band-Aid solution, but and then if someone's a male and they're having that, if they're in a good enough place, blood donations can sometimes be a great solution to kind of help induce iron recycling. Does aspirin powder, an appropriate dose for their size, would be a good option for kids if you just need to help them get some quick pain relief? I'm honestly not sure, but I think there's something about not giving them aspirin. I can't remember what it is. I would check in with that. Also, what about Nutrigold magnesium? It's an elemental spectrum chelate, I believe. And what about North American Purely E? I'm not very familiar with Nutrigold. As for North American Purely E, yeah, it's a great whole foods vitamin E. Do you use bicarbonate, glycinate, and topical together in one day? Yes, I varietize my magnesium throughout the day, for sure. My total iron, high-end norm, iron saturation 50, iron binding, high end of norm, jump 3 times, ferritin low. I've been eating pro-metabolic, taking panacea, vitamin E, dissolve it all. Could I be detoxing? It's possible. Where's your cerebral plasmin? Where's your copper? Where's your vitamin A to vitamin D ratio? Those are all important factors as well. But yeah, we can definitely be detoxing, or it's a time thing. This can take a lot of time. But yeah, curiosity, it would be magnesium levels, magnesium RBC, and then HTMA, and then vitamin A, or retinol. And copper, ceruloplasmin, those types of things. Because remember, looking at iron without looking at copper does not give us a complete picture of anything. But yeah, it could just be a time thing as well, and detoxing. I am healing SIBO with severe constipation, plus candida overgrowth, plus hypothyroid, plus hormonal imbalances, plus histamine intolerance, and I'm having trouble figuring out what fruits to eat. I would eat the fruits that I tolerate. And if that's none, it's none. I think a lot of people just get hung up on what they should be doing. For example, all the things that you just listed are interconnected. SIBO, candida, hypothyroid, hormone imbalances, histamine intolerance, those are not all separate issues. They're all interrelated. And so making sure we're getting the minerals and nutrients we need without super aggravating our symptoms that mess like too much with our quality of life is the goal. So, we need to be getting certain nutrients and minerals to get those issues under control. But if getting those nutrients and minerals from certain foods is not working, then we may need to get creative. But yeah, what fruits work for you? That would be my question. I know it's like, what fruits should I eat? Well, what fruits are working for you? And if none are, then maybe none. But citrus is particularly aggravating to histamine. So I'd be staying away from that if it's aggravating to you. But yeah, I'd be looking at like juices like grape juice and apple juice. Apple juice tends to be higher in fungus. So if that's a problem, usually like a grape juice or a white grape juice can be helpful. If that's not working, sometimes like applesauce and cooked apples and cooked pears can sometimes be a thing. So we have to just kind of experiment to figure out what works and what doesn't work. The only fruit I know of that is low histamine and SIBO friendly are blueberries. Do you recommend anything other fruit for carb sugar that are helpful? Bad response to bananas, apples, citrus. Yeah, I'd be looking at berries. I'd be looking at all tropical fruits like papaya, mango. I'd be looking at pomegranate juice, blueberry juice, guava juice, guavas, like, tropical fruits. I'd be trying anything that's not on the list. It's, we cannot live our life by a list, meaning that if you're Googling what are high histamine foods or what are SIBO aggravating foods, you're going to get so much conflicting information, whereas your body's going to tell you exactly what works and what doesn't work. So, and sometimes it can take a little bit of experimentation, but, that would probably be the best way. How do you implement topical magnesium oil? I personally just rub it on my abdomen, specifically on my liver and my bladder. But yeah, I just like rub it on my skin. I have a lot of questions about brands. Thanks for answering everything. Did you hear if Zinc gelatin powder? Yeah, I've heard of it. I'm not really sure about the quality of it. I know a lot of people use it and have great results from it. I'm just not sure about the quality of it. Also, do you have a brand recommendations for makeup cleansing wipes and a shampoo to thicken, give body? Lots of thanks for answering my questions. Makeup wipes, I don't think are necessary. I like to use squalene oil not squalene oil, micellar like cleansing water on cotton pads or oil cleansing method, which I think is the best remover of makeup. So oil cleansing is where you put oil on your skin, just makeup and all, and then take a washcloth that has warm water on it and then lay it on your skin and wipe off the makeup. And then you do it one more time. And that can really actually clean the makeup from the pores rather than just wiping it off the surface of the skin. I really like Cosma Beauty, Kossma. Her like pre-cleanse, her oil pre-cleanse works really well. And then shampoo, I think that's very particular to the person, but I really like Inner Sense. I also like Under Luna for like my daily, or not daily, but my regular washing, conditioning. And then Morocco Method is one of my favorite scalp cleansing systems. So they have like clay-based shampoos, and I don't like to use them for daily, but I like to put them on my scalp at least like once or twice a week or in between washes to really cleanse my scalp. What are your thoughts on eyelash boosters like Latisse? I read something that contained prostaglandins and my sister likes it, worried about hormonal disruptions. Anything like that is going to be problematic. I've had like severe horror stories from those things, like causing all eyelashes to fall out and stuff like that. But honestly, like, it's kind of one of those things where I personally just choose not to use stuff like that because I know there's almost always repercussions, but who am I to say like what other people are going to choose to use? Any tips on getting rid of a plantar wart on the ball of the foot? Anything to put topically or take internally? Thanks. I know I've heard of like some people using like cotton balls with apple cider vinegar on them or tea tree oil. I'm honestly not sure how well that works, but I guess it's worth a try. Do you think you'll ever buy a red light panel? I look constantly and then back away because of the price. Yeah, I probably will at some point. I just can't make it practical right now. Like I've talked about before, I'm living with my parents right now because I'm going to buy a house and I'm trying to keep my stuff to a minimum. Thankfully, I am able to take 2 of their rooms. So I take a guest room for like my studio, and then I have a room with a walk-in closet, but it's like in a bathroom. But it's like I only have minimal amount of storage for things, and I'm like running a business. And so it's difficult for me. And so like certain things that are unnecessary as of now, I just don't buy. And it's not because like, it's just I have no room for them. I'm like, where would I put that thing? Like my room is already stuffed full of crap. So I just have to like be picky and choosy. Will I buy it at one point? Probably. I just like to have a space for everything. And if I don't know like how I'm going to integrate it into my routine or where I'm going to put it, then I often just like don't purchase it until I have an idea. But yeah, I have like a plan. I don't know if I would buy that first or like an infrared sauna, which I know is a lot more expensive, but I feel like it might give me a little bit more bang for my buck. So I don't know. I just, until then, I don't know. And so I'm not going to buy one yet. But will I ever buy one? Probably at some point. I know there's a lot of like discussion about the EMFs involved in the LED lights. And so those panels tend to be lower EMF. But honestly, like I can't stress about every little thing in my life. And I don't really stress too much about it, the limited. Thoughts on EMDR therapy? Yeah, so I think it can be an effective form of therapy. I've talked a little bit about my like, I don't always love, remember, I'm not a therapist or a medical professional, but like I've done enough research to realize like talk therapy, just consistently talking about our problems without working through them or finding out where the trauma is, probably is not the best way to go. But I know a lot of people that have said talk therapy has been very helpful for them. So maybe it's just the therapist. But I know there are other like integrative approaches that include things like EMDR that can help us work through trauma and help us actually find where almost like where the break in our brain is, where we're redirecting our thoughts or are causing us to go in one direction of fight or flight rather than a different direction. So I think it can be an effective practice. I am working on getting in with someone that practices it near me. But I have heard of a lot of people saying it's just way intense, and it's really like, you have to be ready to deal with the trauma that it brings up, because it can bring up a lot of trauma. As most of us have had some type of trauma, some more than others, but trauma is trauma in the sense of like trauma is going to affect our systems, regardless of like of what it is. And it's important to be ready to work through it and to be in that headspace. And also like we want to support our bodies to get to that place where we can deal, because we want to think about it as like, physically, we're always talking about like letting things flood from our tissues, but emotions come out of our tissues as well, in the sense of like when we experience an injury or a trauma, our body stores it. It tries to protect us from it. And when we go to release it, this happens a lot with like trigger point therapy or like myofascial release. You'll work out a trigger point and all of a sudden you'll just want to cry or scream, or you'll have an intense detox reaction because the body was actually like holding on and protecting us from that trauma. And so when we released it, although it's going to be good in the long run, what's happening in the now is not fun to deal with. So I probably butchered that, but I'm just trying to make a point that there can be a lot of different effective, like emotional and therapy techniques out there. And I think it's just finding the right one that works for us. Having difficulty getting my morning body temp up during my follicular phase. Afternoon temps are normal. I've tried a variety of bedtime snack options. Any other advice, or just to be more patient? Yeah, like I would be considering like what supplements possibly, or not supplements, but nutrients needed. Like, are you being very good about potassium, magnesium? Potassium tends to be a very particular one that is effective. Like a lot of people are missing it, and when they start to focus on it, it works really well. Trying to think of what else. And then I would be like looking at the context of just exercise. Like, are you doing any workouts the day before that are maybe causing them to be low? Sometimes it can just take time, especially if you're dealing with your like underlying stressors, like gut issues and iron overload. Like those are all things that will, temps and pulses will increase over time because metabolism will increase over time. During my first pregnancy, I purposely took or stupidly took way too much iron, and it causes intrusive thoughts. As soon as I stopped iron supplement, they stopped. Thought you might have some insight. Yeah, definitely can be. It's a mineral of like that induces a lot of fear. And yeah, it definitely can be problematic emotionally for sure. For sure. The other day I heard Loren talking about liver pill dose, usually 6 per day, should be much higher during pregnancy. What's a safe and good dose of liver while pregnant? I do it raw, thank you. Honestly, I don't like to give recommendations out because I think everyone's different and needs to listen to their body. Personally, I'll probably take during pregnancy. I'm just trying to figure out like what I would take during pregnancy. If I was doing it raw, I'd probably keep it at 6 ounces and then probably try to implement some other organs like heart, kidney, spleen, that kind of thing, like periodically. But yeah, honestly, like if I was doing other vitamin A foods as well, I'd be kind of careful with just doing too much iron or just pounding liver. I'd be kind of like, I would try to varietize it a little bit more rather than just focusing on liver. I'm probably going to at least do heart and kidney, which like, give me like, but I'll do anything for my unborn child. And then possibly even spleen. Was recommended kratom for a natural way to help reduce stress. Have you heard of this? Any thoughts? I've heard of it. I'm not like into the science of it. I know there are like underground people that are really into it. I feel like it's similar to like CBD oil, which I know like people that get a lot of success from CBD oil are usually pretty magnesium deficient. So I think like with a lot of these things, they're just band-aids, because if you remove it and you're not any better than you were before, then probably want to focus on the root causes. How often do you take vitamin E? As of now, I take it daily. That might change eventually, but I've been really working on my iron issues and trying to be consistent with just like my basic nutrients like magnesium, sodium, potassium, vitamin E, vitamin C, and then like magnesium cofactors like B6, like B vitamins and boron. Just like the basics, pretty much the RCP, like root cause protocol with a few tweaks, like just making sure I'm getting plenty of carbs and protein. What would be the root cause of a sparse cervical mucus around ovulation? Been TTC, but I'm nervous that the lack of cervical mucus is part of what's preventing conception. Everyone has different cervical mucus. Like honestly, that's not the thing that's preventing for a lot of people. I think there's other factors involved. I'm working on the root cause and healing my metabolism, but was curious if there were ways to optimize cervical mucus in the meantime. Yeah, we need protein to make cervical mucus and then hydration. So kind of keeping in mind that protein is essential. A lot of women are not getting enough bioavailable animal protein. And then hydration, which comes in the form of like, yes, water, but minerals specifically to help water get into the cells. So, and then like vitamin A and vitamin E are very important for all, vaginal lubrication and cervical mucus production. So, but everyone's going to have different amounts of cervical mucus. Like no one's going to be the same. There are some people that get a lot of cervical mucus, and then there are some people that get none, or very little. I shouldn't say none, but little. So I think that's something that we shouldn't stress about unless we're like really having a hard time conceiving. And then you would go over the factors that could possibly be the cause. Hello, Jess. Do you recommend Crown Prince oysters packed in olive oil or water? I noticed you mentioned them with olive oil a lot, but thought water would be better. Yeah, I mean, if you can find them packed in water, that's awesome. I have a very hard time finding them packed in water, so olive oil tends to be the more realistic one. But yeah, I mean, as long as it's just plain water. Wow, what a pickle to be you, walking around town bringing spring wherever you go. What the heck? Some of these people are weird. You aren't ignorant. So grateful to have you. Just not used to feeling sick while working. Yeah, I have worked with 2 nurses that either like one was an operating room nurse and one was a more of like she was kind of like, I feel like she did like general work, but she was on her feet all day. Like she had no breaks. She was kind of like I feel like she was like a manager, or she was doing something where she was just working all day. And it was very hard for her to eat as well. She could not eat all day long for whatever reason. And so we had to really work around that. And she had like 4 shifts a week that were very long. And so it just took time, and we had to be creative, but it's doable. It just takes time. Any facial moisturizer you can recommend too. I personally use Healthy Hair Forever and or Forever Healthy Hair. I always call it Healthy Hair Forever. It's Forever Healthy Hair, which is her Lush serum. And then I like Cosma Beauty. I like her squalene oil. I don't see you eating a lot of grains, so it seems similar to paleo. Can you explain other sources of carbs? I feel like I'm always hungry. I do eat grains. Like I eat sourdough bread, gluten-free sourdough, and probably like rice. Cause I do like cassava pasta or rice pasta. I don't pound grains, but I definitely like do them. I'm Russian, so I do well with like buckwheat. It's called kasha, kamut, those types of like seed-like grains. But as a rule, my body does better when I am a little bit more like paleo-ish with my carbs. So I do like lots of sweet potatoes, lots of fruit. Like, for example, like some people are like, I think they're limited in their mind. They're like, oh, if I eat an apple, I'll just eat 1 apple. And I'm like, I eat like 3 apples in a sitting, you know? Or they're like, just eat a banana. And I'm like, I put 2 bananas in my shake. Or I think like people just kind of get limited with like the amounts they're allowed to eat of something, where I'm like, why? Like if you're going to eat 1 apple, why not eat like a couple apples? So like I usually have like a 1-to-2 ratio with my protein to carbs. So that ends up being quite a bit. If I'm having like 35 grams of protein at a meal, that means I'm having like 70 to 80 grams of carbs at a meal. And so if I pick a carb like an apple, I just eat 70 grams worth of an apple. Or potato, like I just eat, 80 grams of carbs worth of a potato. So that might be 2 potatoes or 2.5 potatoes. Right now I'm loosely counting macros just because I'm trying to lose some weight. But yeah, I mean, you can do grains. If you do well on grains, there's no reason to not do grains. Just because I don't eat a bunch of grains on Instagram doesn't mean I'm not eating them. At what point in my cycle can I start taking progesterone? Is it as soon as I ovulate or after the fertility window closes? And then do I stop at the start of my period? Everyone's different, but most people take it like after they ovulate. But yeah, everyone's different. Can you talk about iron a little more? I know so many women test low on iron, but you're saying we are overloaded with iron. Yeah, because iron in the blood is not reflective of iron in the tissues. And the research is very clear on this fact. It's very much a dysregulation with copper and iron because we're mineral deficient and nutrient deficient. And so we have to remember that just because we're deficient in the blood of something does not mean we are deficient overall. We have to remember that there are other caveats to storing things in the tissues. And I think people have gotten themselves into quite a tizzy just focusing and relying only on blood tests without looking at the whole picture. But this is very much based on Morley Robbins' work. You can check him out, the Root Cause Protocol, or on Facebook if you like Facebook groups like Magnesium Advocacy Group. But his research is extremely extensive. And when you start to look at the literature, it is very clear that anemia has nothing to do with iron being low and everything to do with iron being stuck. And it's usually bioavailable copper that's to blame, which is why I focus so heavily on animal foods like animal fats that contain retinol, and making sure you guys are getting plenty of magnesium and focusing on sodium and potassium and B vitamins and getting plenty of protein, carbs, and fats together to regulate the adrenal glands. Like this helps with our regulation of iron. At what point in my cycle can I start taking progesterone? I already got that question. Whoops. Do you know the nutritional effects of smoking weed? What can occasional smoker do to replenish after getting high? I'm wondering how to support hubby after he smokes. Yeah, it's interesting because I noticed that a lot of people that do have very low temps and pulses the following day. Cold hands and feet, which, kind of coincides with like the adrenaline response or the stress response, which makes me wonder if the pain relief part of it is because it's actually increasing cortisol, which is a corticosteroid to reduce inflammation and pain, right? Like if we're running from an angry bear and we step on a rock and break our foot, we're got to keep running as long as possible. And so that's why adrenaline is there and cortisol is there to kind of like keep us going regardless. But when we come down from that, we really crash. And so I would just like be focusing on eating enough and things like that. If it's occasional, it's probably not enough to make a difference. But like, what is their definition of occasional and your definition of occasional? A lot of times I feel like people are doing it more than they like, even if they like just don't even realize it. And so sometimes just keeping track of like what the temps and pulses are the next day can be a big like game changer. Is there an ideal way to take oregano for gut health? I was thinking of taking it before a meal with the carrot salad. Yeah, I noticed that when you take your antibacterials like right before doing a carrot salad, they tend to be a little bit more effective. And that makes sense to me because you're taking something to kill and then you're putting in fiber to bind. Like that makes some sense. But yeah, I mean, I think just taking it is effective. Are there nutrients or foods I should focus on or prioritize coming off eating vegan for the past 2 years? Yeah, for sure. Vitamin A specifically, cream, butter, egg yolks, liver. Those are like boom, boom. And then bioavailable protein is also very important. That comes from animal foods. But yeah, I mean, what you crave is probably the best guide, the best compass. Do you have any suggestions on how to naturally remove excess tissues due to endometriosis? Some people have, I think, used like systemic enzymes with some good results, but honestly, I think there comes a point where sometimes we do need to remove the excess tissue because it's causing more problems than it's solving. So because I've heard of a lot of women with endo that get the excess tissue removed and they're doing a lot better. So I think like we should just use our gut and trust our gut with that. Because I've never really heard of like a natural removal. I'm not saying if it can't be done, but I don't see how that could happen. But then again, there's plenty of people that get rid of their fibroids naturally and things like that. So who am I to say? Thoughts on tiger nuts to help me get in more fiber? If you're having a problem with fiber, just eat 2 carrots, add in beets, apples, things like that. I mean, if you like tiger nuts, hey, more power to you. Get them in. But if it's specifically for fiber, I don't see like why we couldn't get that from just like increasing the amount of carrot salad or increasing the amount of apple or doing beets or things like that. Is there a specific type of ratio to vitamin K to aspirin that you find keeps things balanced? And what do you think is the upper limit of aspirin? I personally don't do well with a lot of aspirin. I think a lot of people don't do well with a lot of aspirin because it does thin the blood quite a bit. I know Ray Peat recommends like 1 milligram of vitamin K, just a regular dose of aspirin. But aspirin, like I think that it can sometimes cause more problems than it's not for everyone. A regular dose. Is having so much juice spiking my blood sugar? I find myself craving gallons of orange juice. Yeah, you're not alone. I feel like everyone that starts drinking orange juice again after like not drinking it for a long time just like cannot stop drinking it. I mean, you can always check your blood sugar. If you're worried about your blood sugar, get a blood glucose monitor and check your blood sugar like an hour after you drink it. But I found that like that was the only thing the only carb I could tolerate post keto for a while was orange juice. And it did spike my blood sugar slightly, but not as much as like a potato did or something like that. Do you know of a good toothpaste that's safe to swallow? I'm looking for a natural toothpaste I can use for my kids. Yeah, Risewell. I really like their kids' toothpaste. I actually prefer it to the to the minty flavor. It's like a flavor. It's bomb. I live in SoCal. Do you have a hair colorist recommendation in a healthy way? Yeah, if you live like I live in like Inland Valley, Temecula area. I go to Paramount Salon. It's off of Temecula Parkway. I see Rachel Wittenberg. Yeah, she's great. She doesn't have like doesn't like use like natural products, but she's very much she's respectful of your hair. I think that's like the biggest thing is she just like respects the hair and she learns what you want. But when you want to do blonde, just as a recommendation or just as something to like remember when you want blonde, and I've been going blonde since I was like 17. And I have like pretty light base. So, I'm not blonde, but I don't have like bleach blonde hair. When you're using bleach and you're trying to nail the blonde you want, make sure that your expectations you go in is knowing it's going to take quite a bit of time to get to where you want to go. I feel like it took a whole year for me and Rachel to figure out how I exactly pictured my blonde. And there were some appointments where I came away and was like, yeah, I could we're getting closer, but we're not quite there yet. And so it can take some time to really nail color, especially if you have like something in your mind, and make sure it's like, that your blonde is going to be different than anyone else's blonde. It depends on your base. It depends on a lot of different things, like how your hair ages. And I say this because a lot of people go in and want my hair, or they want the color of my hair, and I naturally have very light hair. And the base bumps very well. Like I lift my blonde lifts very well, and it does not brass. And so people are always like, oh, I want like your blonde. And it's very hard to nail without a lot of maintenance. Like I just tell people that because my hair is not going to be your hair and vice versa. And it's important. Like I tried to nail certain hairs for a long time, and I just realized it wasn't going to work for me. But that was a long way of saying I go to Paramount Salon and Spa. Introduced probiotics Megaspore after months of antibacterials and having bad hemorrhoid flare-up. Any tips on repopulating gut bacteria or ideas as to why this could be happening? Yeah, microbial imbalance can definitely cause hemorrhoids. I've seen it a lot, gut dysbiosis, because the mucosa is oftentimes, remember that bacteria does make mucosa. There are certain strains of bacteria that help build up the mucosal barrier and keep the gut lining nourished. And when you get rid of all of them, repopulating them is hard. But sometimes it's just that the probiotics we're using is not working well for us. Megaspore and spore-based probiotics are antibacterial in nature. So if you are like, you're coming off of like some strong antibacterials and you are now trying to take some more antibacterial probiotics, it might not be the best option for repopulating the gut. We want a variety of bacteria that would be native to our own digestive tract. And sometimes spore-based probiotics, like just used alone, are not enough or not the right strains. I have like an ongoing love affair with Bifido Maximus by the Gut Institute, as well as like doing bits of fermented foods, not a ton, but tiny bits, like bites of them. And those tend to be like my favorites. Some people do well on Terra Forma by Enviromedica. Not everyone does. And some people do really well on Equilibrium. How much protein do you have a day? Well, it's based on my overall calories. So I nail 2,200 calories a day. And so I hit about 149 grams of protein, which is about 30% of my calories are coming from protein. But that, just because I'm doing that doesn't mean that's right for you. It's very important to use like a TDEE calculator, figure out what you need based on your activity, what are your calorie needs, and then, we have to do the math. So if we're getting 30% of, 30% is coming from protein. 30% is, 30% of our calories are protein, 30% of our calories are coming from fat, and 50% are coming from carbs. We have to do the math. And kind of figure that out. But I'm doing a YouTube video on that soon, so stay tuned. But it isn't fully nourished. I do teach you guys how to do that. What would you use topically for calming any kind of rash or skin irritation? Probably nothing. Just let it air out and try to get to the bottom of maybe what's driving it. Sometimes using honey really is soothing, or like some type of like bee balm. But yeah, I would probably use the least amount of things as possible. Any recommendations for gut healing, struggling with malabsorption, have extremely low stomach acid and digestive enzyme production, already taking HDL and enzyme? Thank you, Jess. Yeah, I mean, we got to get to the root of our stress. When we're super stressed out, our gut's really going to be messed up. And so, if we hyper focus on gut healing, we're never going to fix it, because we need to look at our metabolism as a whole and how it's affecting our gut health. We can't heal without enough energy and nutrients. We just can't, because blood flow is going to come away from the digestive tract. All right, guys, I'm going to do a few more questions. And then if I didn't get to your question, I'm sorry. We'll get to it next week, or we'll try. Just because I'm trying to keep these not so long. Do you know of Dr. Tracy? Her stuff is very similar to yours. Also, what are some ways I can detox from antibiotics? I feel so tired all the time. Antibiotics mess with our iron to copper ratio, and they really can cause some severe iron dysregulation. So we really need to focus on bioavailable copper. That comes from grass-fed beef liver, whole foods vitamin C, bee pollen, those types of things. But yeah, I'm not familiar with Dr. Tracy. I need to look her up. Do you know if progesterone has an effect on mineral balance? I feel so calm, but I can get sore muscles, loose poops, and this weird dry cough that happens when my minerals get imbalanced in the past. Yeah, it definitely can. It can affect, it has an effect on iron, has an effect on copper, and it totally has an effect on our stress hormones and our stress in general, which can affect potassium, sodium, magnesium. So yeah, it definitely can have an effect. Possibly taking too much. Do you eat fats, Jess? Morningstar? Do I eat enough fats? Yeah, I definitely do. Getting enough fats from the right sources, but I don't like to do so much that I gain weight. There's a fine balance for me. What does salt do in the stomach? I like to take a pinch sometimes, but if I do too much, it makes me nauseous. Also, James Bond pours salt in his drink to make himself throw up poison. Yeah, if you do too much, you're going to throw it up or poop it out. But yeah, salt can be very antibacterial. How tall am I? I'm about 5'5"-ish. Not super short, not super tall. Hi, friend. My husband struggles with dandruff really bad. Is there something we should be focusing on or eliminating that is common? We've been very pro-metabolic for 9 weeks. Almost seems to be worse. Yeah, usually dandruff is going to be driven by fungus. And so when you're dealing with fungus, it can take a lot of time. And if you're implementing too many carbs, too much dairy, it can definitely aggravate it and make it worse. So make sure you're doing raw carrot salad very consistently. Maybe consider doing some antifungals, but I would say more focus on the basic gut stuff that I talk about in Fully Nourished, and maybe back off on dairy a little bit and see if that helps. And then, making sure there's a very regular bowel movements. That's very important. When it comes to fungal issues, it really is about, iron feeding the fungus. Copper is supposed to be regulating the fungus. But oftentimes these are very dysregulated systems, and so it can take time for those to balance out. So in the meantime, it's really about keeping the bowels moving, making sure we're doing some gentle fibers that are going to help bind and carry to the junk, and also possibly focusing on those other nutrients that are needed, like vitamin E, magnesium, making sure you're getting enough sodium and potassium. Those types of things can be very, very helpful. What could cause getting tired after eating? Sometimes after I finish a meal, I just get so sleepy and want to nap. It's usually insulin resistance or blood sugar issues or very poor digestion. If we have digestive issues or gut issues, that can be a factor. How do you know if castor oil packs can cause detox symptoms? Yes, absolutely. It can increase quercetin in the body, which can actually help detox iron. Hey, Jessica, I have acne on my cheekbones after coming off of hormonal birth control. I believe the acne is hormonal. Where's a good place to start? You might actually find a lot of benefit from taking my mini class, Mend Your Cycle. It's very much just about helping support the systems that help detoxify estrogen and boosting our natural progesterone levels, which is important. What was the beef protein powder you mentioned earlier? It's called Paleo Thin by Julian Bakery. It's It's kind of random, but I found it and it has pretty okay ingredients. The only thing that I don't like that it has is stevia, but whatever. I put sugar in it. Is basal body temperature more accurate than LH strip test when trying to conceive? Yeah, I mean, I think they can both be useful. Like you're trying to really figure out and nail down your ovulation. I don't think either are needed, especially if you know like right around the time when you're ovulating and you're having regular sex. But it just depends. Like if you're trying to really nail down your ovulation, just like nail it down, then yeah, we can use both. Like basal body temp, cervical mucus, cervical position, LH strips, they can all be very helpful. But we kind of have to learn to really track our signs, because at the end of the day, it's really about trying to figure out when we're ovulating. Wondering what products you would recommend for gut repopulation other than Megaspore or just Thrive. Do you use products other than these, and are they enough for repopulation? I think that prebiotics are probably the most important part of repopulation. Like what you're eating on a regular basis is going to feed certain bacteria in the digestive tract. Also, minerals are going to totally regulate like what pathogens are coming in. So I do like certain products, but I think a lot of people just do a number on their guts by taking high doses of antibacterials, not realizing they're just wiping everything out. I personally like things that are going to be really native to the human digestive tract, which often means they're very expensive. But personally, I think Bifido Maximus is probably one of the most effective probiotics for trying to increase native strains of bacteria. It can take a lot of time, and it can take just consistency and work with Bifido, but it has some really great strains in it. Bifido Bacterium infantis, specifically the brand by Natrem, Natrem, I think can be effective as well. It's only one strain, but it is the strain that we tend to pass to babies that helps them digest milk. So I think it does have an effect on digesting dairy. So I really like to stick to native Bifidobacterium strains and things like that. But yeah, there are quite a few like I have in my back pocket. I like GI Assist by Life Extension, Terraforma by, or it's Terraflora, I believe. Terraflora by Enviromedica. Like those are a few that I like, but it just really depends on the person. And some people are just so not taking care of their adrenals, and they're so hyper focused on just dealing with their gut that they need to take a step back and really start dealing with their stress. So yeah, I mean, it just depends on the person. Migraines the day before a first day of period, they're horrible. Been doing the carrot coke. Any other ways to support? Been FN for 3 months. Magnesium is usually pretty effective. That often, like our needs for magnesium increase right before our period, so that can sometimes play a big role. All right, I'm going to do 2 more questions, and then I saw a question just as I'm scrolling, and it said, like, how much water should we be aiming for if we're doing, like, fruit juice and milk? Like, we should just drink when we're thirsty. I talk about it in the hydration lesson of Fully Nourished, but, yeah, I mean, like, the only exception to that rule is like people who are working out outside, serious athletes, people who are running, doing like very intense exercise, they might need to actually intentionally hydrate a lot more. But for most people, they need to be focusing more on minerals. Just had my 3rd postpartum ovulation and had such an astonishing amount of cervical mucus and an insatiable libido. So glad to be healing. Woo woo! We love that that great libido and that good cervical mucus. How much kcals do you have a day? Well, what I do per day is not going to determine what you do. It's really important to understand that our goals and our life is the thing that should direct that the most. It should not be what somebody else is doing. The goal should always be to eat the highest amount of calories we can consume to feel the best we can without rapidly gaining weight. Because if we're rapidly gaining weight, then it means that we're eating more calories than we are burning. Now, obviously, there's safety weight, and those things are important. And usually there is like a 10 to 30 pound weight gain. But if we are just rapidly gaining weight and we're eating 2,500 calories, it's probably a little too soon to be up that high. So it just really depends. But if you're trying to build muscle, then sometimes like you need to be eating more. You need to be eating in a surplus. If you're trying to lose fat and, you have more than 10 pounds to lose, then you may need to be in a little bit of a deficit. There are caveats. And so this is where it comes in handy to kind of like figure out what our maintenance calories are, start and then see where we're at. A lot of times we're eating way below our maintenance calories, slowly work up to getting to our maintenance calories, and then see how we're doing at maintenance. The goal is to be at maintenance without gaining weight. If we are there, then we can start to change based on our goals and our needs. What causes large clogged pores? Do you know of any topical solutions that help while doing internal healing? Some people say insulin resistance. Some people say gut stuff. Some people tie it to mineral issues. I honestly don't know. Some people do like aspirin masks to tighten the pores, or like an egg white mask to tighten the pores. I don't know how well those work, but they're worth a try. Do you take an MSM supplement? No, I do not take synthetic sulfur. How would you distinguish between a light period and spotting? If there was an ovulation that came 2 weeks before the period or the spotting? What's the best way to calculate how many calories you need specifically for you with weight loss? I use a TDEE calculator. Is that a good tool? Well, no. We want to make sure we figure out our maintenance first, and then we need to see where we're at. So what is our maintenance, and then what do we actually do in a day? So that's the first thing, is track loosely for like 4 or 5 days. Just see where you're at, where you're coming in. What do you naturally eat? How many calories, how many proteins, how many fats, how many carbs? Just what do you naturally eat? And a lot of times people are just like way under eating and they're not doing well. And so they first need to work on getting their metabolism up, because if you're way under eating and you're not losing weight under eating, there's hormonal issues at play. So the goal is to first get as high as possible without rapidly gaining weight. And then if we need a deficit at that point, then that would be a time that's more appropriate to do a little bit of a deficit. Usually I think like 100 calories a week is good. If we're starting to see some weight loss, we should stop. The goal is to be as high as possible to still achieve the goals. We don't want to just jump low just because. So that's how we kind of do that. But I need to do like some type of video or YouTube series or something to kind of walk you guys through those steps. I have convinced my mom and dad to start eating pro-metabolic, but my dad won't do it because of the hormonal side of it. He thinks it only benefits women. What can I tell him to convince him to change? It's interesting because most people who are pro-metabolic are men. Like look at Danny Roddy or Georgie Dinkov or Tomo Littlewood or Travis Harris NTP or Isaac Pullman. Like it benefits both sides. Men have hormones too. Is a pulse rate of 100 daily basis indicate anything? What is ideal heart rate? Yeah, usually it's a sign that we have high adrenaline. We need to lower, get our stress hormones down. If you think you may have hypothyroidism, should I see a naturopathic doctor? Where I live, there aren't many options. I mean, if you want to, I think like, what are you going to do once you get the results back? What is going to be the action steps? Because I think the action is much more important than the test. Like the tests don't do anything for us. They just give us the answers, and then we have to actually take the action. So it's one of those things. I think it's a personal choice. What herb or tea would be safe to help sleep while pregnant? I'm 16 weeks and I can't sleep well. Very frustrating. You'd have to look into that yourself. A lot of women are not sleeping well because they're not eating enough during the day to balance their blood sugar. And so that would be like something to look into. Maybe ask your doctor about magnesium or something like that. All right, you guys. I am coming to my limit, and I feel bad because there's so many questions, but make sure you guys come in next week and ask your questions. Like I said before, on Instagram, I'm going to put a box so you can pre-submit your questions, and then I'll timestamp them in the description box below the live. So if you want to come watch the live later, you'll know exactly where your question is. I think that will be a better way to go about it. But thanks so much for joining me on Wednesday. I really enjoy this time, and you guys ask awesome questions. And I just appreciate your guys' willingness to learn and to get to the root of your imbalances. So I'll see you next Wednesday.